Welcome to the Coach's Table Podcast, where coaches come to grow personally and professionally through real-world application and online education. What is going on, everybody? Happy July 9th weekend, and I hope everybody's having a great weekend because, man, the time is moving. It is hot. It is sticky outside. It is, it's summertime, and I love the summertime. Sometimes great. It's amazing, but it moves so fast in comparison to some of the other months. And you're just like, you look up and you're like, how is it freaking August already? How is it September? How are we back into the swing of things? So it's crazy how fast the summertime can move, but it's also, really nice to get outside and be at the pool and catch some rays and do all that cool, fun stuff as well. Today's guest, before I introduce him, we're going to have a great conversation about it, in regard to those of you that are, from a business standpoint, from a private sector standpoint. Super excited to talk about that, just to see the contrasts that occur compared to the college sector or the high school sector, because I think we can learn a lot from each other. But before I introduce him and bring him on, guys, if you would, use a huge favor. Take 10 seconds, share the show. It takes 10 seconds. If you would, that'd be much appreciated. If we provide you any sort of value, that is, if we entertain you, if we educate you, if we have you think of like, oh man, that's a good idea, or a aha moment occurs while you're listening to this, do us a huge favor, share the show. We drop the full-length episodes on YouTube, so if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe and watch there as well. Drop your comments below. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, do us a huge favor, share the show. It takes 10 seconds of your life, and we would appreciate that very, very much. So, without further ado, Mr. Julian Locasto. What's up, my man?
What's going on, brother? Happy to be here. Thank you for allowing me to come on today.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. I was on yours just the other day, which was really cool. And I hope that one's doing well for you. But it's always great to, get on with other people that either have their own podcast, their own show, or doing their other things, besides just training, which is amazing in itself, but it's also really cool. And, people have other things going on and you get to be a part of that and help them out as well. This episode is sponsored by TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is the #1 performance platform for strength coaches around the world. Their software provides coaches with an elevated experience when it comes to program development, data tracking, and staying connected with athletes and clients. Coaches also have access to consultations with TeamBuildr's in-house sports scientists to help manage and analyze data. Head to teambuildr.com and sign up with promo code TABLE to start your free 30-day trial. That is TeamBuildr, TeamBuildr.com, and sign up with promo code TABLE to start your free 30-day trial. Coaches, this podcast is sponsored by Samsung Equipment. They have been providing elite strength training equipment and professional weight room solutions since 1976. If you value product quality, great customer service, and a company with integrity, make Samsung Equipment your go-to. Visit them at samsungequipment.com and let them know the Coach's Table Podcast gave you a seat at their table. That is Samsung Equipment, SAMSON Equipment.com, and let them know the Coach's Table Podcast gave you a seat at their table.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think, in our industry, I find it's always amazing when we can continue to network and build and find other people that are doing what we love and just kind of sharing and growing together. And obviously, like seeing your platform as well, it's been growing, and seeing what this show has amassed to be, like just seeing from my perspective as somebody who's been following you as well for a while, like it's been really cool to see it's growing, and then, also having mine on the other end where we've been pretty much growing at the same pace. So it's been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, man. It's, been very fortunate, very thankful for the people that, continue to listen, continue to watch it. And, I get to have the opportunity to have great people like yourself on, which is a lot of fun. And it's actually kind of cool how we connected because, I was up in that area where you're at. Unfortunately, we didn't get to meet in person, but that's kind of how we connected. It's like, yo, I saw your stuff. Hey, what's up? Like, you're close by. I like what you do. And I was like, yeah, I like what y'all do. And there's so many connections that I make like that. You know what I'm saying? And It just goes to show, like, I've had the conversation so many times with people and maybe yourself as well. And even when you started like putting content out there, just putting yourself out there, it's amazing how people are so afraid of what other people will think. But it's like what you should be looking for is like the amount of connections you will make because people will notice your stuff. And I think that's something that nobody ever really talks about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually really funny just because like that's probably the most underrated piece of, creating content and social media in general is just the networking
Yeah.
aspect of it.
Mm.
Like, we're seeing it now, especially with the evolution of social media. Now we're seeing like, the threads of the world coming about. Like we're seeing, the clash between threads and Twitter. We're
Yeah.
seeing, Instagram, we're seeing the TikToks. Like it's just crazy how, it's evolved over the years. Because I
Mm.
remember when I was in, I can remember when I was in high school and college when like a lot of these social platforms were even just surfacing just
Yeah.
to start. And it's
Yeah.
just like, you could post one piece of content and somebody across the world can see it. And then just, you never even know that like that individual, like just that hits that like button or sends you a DM and like tries to connect
Hmm.
with you. Like, you can now have a friend for life or even somebody that ends up just like referring you out and like giving you
Mm.
business or even just like just pushing your stuff out there, getting you noticed. And then even just, you never even know. Cause I've even heard stories where networking and building connections through social media has even gotten people jobs, like,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
then just like
100%.
secured opportunities for them and their families. And that's like something that I feel like people need to value social media more for. Obviously, I feel like social also gets a bad rap just for the fact that, obviously we're glued to our phones 24/7. And obviously it's
Yeah.
not like how we were when we were kids, when we were
Hmm.
outside all the time and stuff. So like, I get that the times are changing, but from a pure networking standpoint, just building yourself and building a community of like-minded individuals and growing opportunities for yourselves and your families, I think it's just undefeated in that aspect.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we get so caught up in the number, right? Like how many followers, how many likes, how many comments, shares, etc. And like, yes, that helps accelerate your growth. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, that's the way that this algorithm works, whether it's a good one or a bad one, right? But that's, yeah, I understand that. But at the same time, it's like, to your exact point, right? Like, you don't know who you're going to meet, right?
Yeah.
And that person can be that one person can change the direction of somebody's life, career, thought process, whatever the case may be. And it's like people work so hard to amass 10,000 followers, 20, 30, 40, 50, and like they want that number to go up because they think that's what increases their value. And like to a certain extent, sure, but it's like that one person, maybe you only had 300 or 500 followers, like, but there's one person inside that could change their direction. So I just feel like at times we get so caught up in a number, right, rather than like good quality people, and actually just like developing a relationship with them rather than so
Yes.
much as like my followers. How many do I get? Oh, I lost followers on this post. I shouldn't post that anymore. Like you see people talk about that all the stuff and all the time. It's just like, hey man, yes, it's great to have a larger audience, and I agree with that. But don't get too caught up in a particular number if that's what you think provides you value or not, right? Like because
Yeah.
having X amount of followers isn't what defines you as your value.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, like you look into the science of it all, and it's just that like when you see that
Yeah.
notification pop up on your screen that you got another like or another follower, it's just another
Mhm.
dopamine spike in your body.
Mhm.
So it's like it's just that natural response that we get, and I just think you should, like you said, you shouldn't get too caught up in the numbers. You shouldn't get too
Mhm.
caught up in like how your following is building and stuff like that. Obviously, like, from a grand scheme of things, yes, it's cool, it's important, like in the sense, like, especially if you're on the private side of things, just building a following and just kind of having a way to get your stuff out there and just showing people that you're actually doing what you're saying you're doing is very important.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
think people get too caught up in the idea of, oh, I need X amount of followers, I need X amount of likes on
Mhm.
a video or a post just to be deemed successful. And I think
Right.
that's also what's wrong with our industry is like people get judged based on those things very often.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that's what we need to understand and kind of have a bigger picture on things, because there's a lot of really great coaches out there that don't have big followings, and
Yeah.
there's vice versa. There's people that are not as good coaches that are just very good salespeople that have an incredible following, but
Mm-hmm.
we all know that just do not know how to coach their way out of a shoebox. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it goes both ways, but
Mm.
you know, all of it ties back to the fact that I don't think the following account should really impact how you're going about things on social.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
at the end of the day, like post content that about something that you're truly passionate about, something
Mm-hmm.
that drives you, and ultimately the consumer is who's going to be the ones that judge whether or not your content's good anyway. So
Yep.
like, don't be scared to post anything and just fear of kind of, oh well, it needs to be perfect. I fell into that trap very early on, like, and still to this day I still fall into it. I always post
Yeah.
something and I'm like, oh well, I wonder if anybody's actually going to like this. But at the end of
Sure.
the day, you have to think back to the point and be like, content and whether or not people like it is all in the eyes of the consumer. It has nothing to do with you, and just so you might as well
Mm.
just keep posting stuff that you're passionate about.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. And like, I mean, if let's say you put a post out there, a tweet, whatever, video, whatever it is, okay, and it falls flat, like, you know what you get tomorrow? There's another opportunity to do it again. You know what I'm saying? Like, just
Absolutely.
because one doesn't hit or everyone doesn't hit, like, it doesn't matter. And at the same time, if people judge you based upon the number of likes that you get on a particular post, that's kind of shallow of them anyways, right? Like, if they don't even take the time to like get to know who you are, what you're about, or see the content and be like, oh, okay, maybe whatever. If they solely judge you upon how many likes, how many comments, that's kind of shallow of them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it all ties back to like in our field, it's just like whether or not you're actually doing what you're saying you're doing,
Yeah.
and like are you actually getting results? I think that's
Yep.
what really matters the most. And it's like if you're proving that you're doing what you're saying you're doing and you're actually getting results at a high level, then who really cares
Mm.
if anybody's liking your stuff or if anybody's actually like, you know, following you or anything of that nature, because those
Yeah.
people that actually see that you're doing what you're actually doing are going to follow you regardless.
Yep. Yep. 100%. And speaking of social, like the stuff that you put out, um, it's so eye catching.
Yeah.
No, it is. Like whether it's a tweet with a video in the background or it's the reels that you put out, things from that standpoint. How do you kind of get them to look so sharp constantly?
Yeah.
And kind of why did you start posting that particular way or with that style?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you for saying that. It really
Yeah.
means a lot. And I've been getting that a lot more lately. So like for me, it's like, I've always come from a very humble place where like, no matter how much attention I get or whatever, I've always just kind of stayed like true to who I am. And honestly, I've always been inspired by the work of Gary Vee. Or, yeah,
Yeah.
for people that don't know who that is, it's
Yeah.
Gary Vaynerchuk. Like if you
Yep.
don't know who he is, you pretty much live under a rock. The guy's everywhere. But one
He
thing that
is,
he really is though,
bro.
and the
He
one thing that
is.
he said was, you need to be naturally curious, and if you're curious enough along the way, you might stumble onto something, something along the way. So for
Sure.
me, I try to be genuinely curious, especially when it comes to like successful creators in the space.
Mm.
And how they go about creating content, and most importantly, how they attract audience's attention. Obviously with the growing age of, short form content on like TikToks and
Yep.
Instagram,
Yep.
going towards more of that short form content, we need to be keeping people's attention, and that's super
Mm.
important. So I try to consume more content and learn how I can implement my message to my audience in a way that's both educational and entertaining. From there, create like kind of just creativity takes shape. I was
Sure.
always into like art growing up, and I used to draw a ton and just kind of like create and do all that kind of stuff. So for me, I kind of go about it in an artistic route and try to get creative on how I can approach content to make it
Mm.
entertaining, engaging, while also trying to get a message across in a digestible way. Because
Yeah.
obviously, when it comes to our industry, it's really tough to kind of sit there and for a minute and a half, just be able to explain a certain topic.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. Like I never try to make videos more than a minute and a half at most.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to our field, like some of these complex topics can get very complicated to explain in just a minute. But how can I've always gone back to the idea of how can I explain a topic to like a fifth grader or to like a 5-year-old? Try to dumb it down in a way that's going to be digestible and easy to understand while also making it in a way that's eye catching. So for me, I've always, just seeing how the top creators go about creating their content and how to keep people engaged. And then from there, I just kind of let creativity take the way. Whether that's, adding a clip from YouTube that I see where, I'm looking at actual like game action. If I'm trying to explain this, a particular physical quality we're trying to work, like let's say like acceleration, top speed, maybe I'm grabbing a highlight of an athlete performing that particular skill or quality, and then I'm kind of blending that into what I'm trying to explain within the given video and just try to create it in an eye-popping way. I don't think you have to get as complex as sometimes I get with it, but I think because honestly, like people ask me all the time, like, how long is it taking you to create these videos?
Yeah.
I'm going to be very honest. It takes a very long time. Like
It does.
I will sit there for hours at the facility, going back and forth from YouTube, going on the internet, grabbing images, like GIFs, and it takes a long time. So like sometimes it doesn't have to be as complicated as I make it, but I also try to make sure that I have the consumer in mind, and I want to make sure that I'm creating something that I know that they'll enjoy, because captivating somebody's attention for about a minute and a half can be sometimes very challenging on the internet. So like I want to make sure that minute and a half is also entertaining as well as they're gaining value from it as well.
So I mean that's spot on. It's crazy how it's crazy to say keeping somebody's attention for a minute and a half is hard, right? Like it's so interesting to say that. Go back 10 years, you know what I'm saying? And you don't have to worry about that. Let alone, the contrast is insane, because then you look at a Netflix, right? And this is what you hear people say all the time. Oh, just get through the first season, then it'll get good. Well, like the first season might be 10 episodes that are 40 minutes a pop, right? And so you're just like, 10 episodes, let's call them an hour, right? That's like 10 hours of time on average, maybe 8, whatever the case may be, right? So it's like we're saying one thing of keeping somebody's attention for a minute and a half is tough. But then the same people we're trying to keep the attention of are also the same people that are saying, go ahead, watch the first season. It's kind of boring, but once you get past that, then it's good. And it's like they're telling you go watch 8 to 10 hours, and we're saying, man, keeping that attention for a minute and a half, now that's tough.
That's tough.
It's so interesting to see the contrast and hear the contrast, let alone then have them take an action afterwards, right? Like have them go click this link, go download this, go whatever. That now that's even harder to get, right? And so it's man, it's so wild to see that.
Smart. It's crazy just because, like you said, I mean, when you put it in that perspective, it's literally like it almost makes you think like contextually about like the platforms itself. And it's like, well, like if we're talking about a Netflix, like obviously like that's longer form content, but it keeps people engaged for longer periods of time. When it comes to like the social media platforms that we're on now, it's like they're all short form. It's like, how are we going to be able to keep engaged? There are some pieces of content that are like 5 seconds long. Literally. And it's like they're just boom, like that. You just scroll past and it's already displayed its message.
Yep.
And it's like, well, like, God, like how can I go and create these things that are actually captivating while also educating at the same time?
In 5 to 7 seconds. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like it's just so mind-boggling, like just like the evolution of content and like how it's like changed. Because initially when like these platforms came out like years and years and years ago, like when Instagram first came out, it was just images. You weren't even allowed to post videos.
Yeah, that's so true.
I think when videos actually came out, it was only 10 to 15 seconds. Like you were allowed to post a video.
Yeah, so, it was. Yeah, it wasn't long. Like you could not.
You weren't allowed to post it. Yeah, you weren't allowed to post anything crazy.
Yeah, because then they went back to that. It's not a series thing YouTube or Instagram had. It's a freaking Oh my gosh, I can't even think of the name right now.
Carousels, like with
No, not the carousels. There's the video
pictures.
component, like the where you could put 6 or 7 minutes on there. Oh my gosh, I
Yeah,
can't even think of it. You know what I'm talking
I know
about?
what you're talking about. I just don't remember
Gosh,
the
why
name as
can't I
well.
think of the name of it? And it was a big deal. It wasn't Reels. It was a thing before Reels.
IG Lives or no TV,
No,
IGTV.
TV, IGTV. That's
Yes,
what it was, and that was a big flop. Like,
yes, yeah.
because that
Nobody
was
actually used that.
yeah. Well, people did that first, and then it was always like 6 to 12 minute videos, and it's like nobody was watching that, and it's like that's
Yep,
because the platform created itself like that. Like it wasn't a platform. It's not a platform to do medium ish length content, right? Like
yes,
Instagram is a quick hit and gone. And if you have like a professional profile, business profile, whatever, you can see like the average time people dip out of your videos, right? And
yes,
it's pretty interesting because it's somewhere in that 3 to 5 second range. Like it's
exactly.
no matter how great the video is, it's somewhere in that 3 to 5 second range. You might get people for like 12 seconds and you might get people that watch the whole thing, but the majority of it is very much like 3 to 5 seconds and they exit it. And it's like,
Exactly.
damn,
And that's why,
damn.
like, when it comes to creating content, I've always gone with the side of how can I grasp their attention within the first few seconds of the video?
Yep,
If you can't hook them in
yep,
within that first 1 to 5 seconds,
yep.
your the content is trash. Like you might as well just like wait till the next day and just go for the next one because you're not gonna get anybody to want to watch the rest of your video if you don't hook them in for that first 5 seconds.
Yeah,
Especially because you go on social and people are just scrolling. Like they're not gonna like unless it's
yeah,
a creator that they actually truly love and enjoy,
right.
like Mr. Beast.
Yeah,
Like Mr. Beast is a great example. He's a guy that literally within the first few seconds of his video, you're already entertained and you want to see more.
yep, yep.
So
You
like
you
he's
feel like
very
you
good at
can't
that.
exit his videos. Like
Exactly.
you watch him and you're like, damn, this is good. Like, he does a
Yeah.
great job of that. He does a
I
great job of opening loops and
yes.
either never closing them or closing them very late in his videos.
Yes. I call it like the trailer effect.
Mm,
Like trailers are like hype tapes.
yep,
They're like maybe a minute long, but they get you to want to watch the longer
the
version
whole thing. Yeah,
of it. And sometimes they can be extremely misleading because it's such a buildup of what the actual film is.
yeah,
It makes you want to watch the film, but at the end of the
yeah.
day, you don't know if that film is actually going to be entertaining for the entirety of the whole thing.
Correct, correct.
Like they just show you the cliff notes, but
Yes,
they do it in such a way that's super engaging that they make you want to stay glued to it and they make
mm,
you interested enough to want more.
yeah. That's so true, though. It's so true, and it's funny because like the trailers typically are like 3 to 5 second clips of specific moments in those movies,
Yeah.
and they just put them together, and it's always if you notice the attention, it's every 3 to 5 seconds, right? Every 3 to 5
Yep.
seconds is when they're changing it to keep you there.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit longer with a trailer like that, but pretty close from that time standpoint. And then it's like it's never a just a straight 1 minute video, right? It's
Mhm.
always 3 to 5 second clip here, maybe a 7 second clip here of 8, 12, 10, 15 clips of the movie. And now you're like, damn, I'm really hooked in it. And they add the music to that,
Yes.
and the effects and all that other stuff. So it does. They do a great job of it. I'm not gonna lie. They do a great job of
Yeah.
it. And it gets you and myself to go see the movies.
Exactly.
But it's like if you take that concept, that's kind of how, if you're in a social standpoint, some of your social should be, if not all of it. It kind of depends a little bit on who you are,
Yeah.
what you're selling, and everything from that standpoint. But yeah,
I think from that perspective, that's where I really started to change the way I was going about my content.
mm,
And that's what really allowed me to take my content to the next level. And I think honestly, just consuming more TikToks was the way to get my other content to transform in itself, because that's really where the Instagrams of the world are
sure,
all headed. That's why reels are so big now.
yeah,
And that's because
yeah.
they simply adapted that from TikTok
And
because they
Facebook's done
saw
the same thing. Like Facebook
exactly.
Reels are being
Facebook
pushed
Reels, yeah.
so much more now than your static posts or just a regular post on Facebook. Because like Facebook understands that they're losing market share tremendously from
Mhm.
a TikTok, from an Instagram Reels, from YouTube Shorts. Like it's all the same thing of
Yes.
super short form content.
Exactly. So that's why I've basically, again, going back to kind of Gary Vee's mindset of like consume. Just
Yeah,
because so that's what
yeah,
I did. I literally like when I got into TikTok, because I'm bigger on TikTok than I am on other platforms. At least that from right now, from my perspective, I'm like,
sure.
especially from a follower count, from a like count, like
Mm-hmm.
I've grown on TikTok tremendously just because the organic reach on there is so crazy when I first got on there.
Yeah.
And just it's based on virality. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can post one or two pieces of content that just go absolutely crazy,
Yep.
and you just take off from there.
Yep.
There's a lot of different, like Instagram's been around for a really long time. The algorithm's more sophisticated. Like there's no virality with it anymore.
Yep.
Back
Yep.
in the day, like when you first got onto the platform, you could post like a couple pieces of content for a week or two straight and you could go viral.
Yep. Yep.
But when it comes to the content now, obviously they're pushing more towards, you know, they're pushing more towards like getting people to actually consume the content that they like versus
Yep.
content that is not liked. So like if
Yeah.
they're pushing more towards short form, they want you to push short form content. If you're not pushing short form content, you're still doing static posts and carousels and pictures and stuff, you're not going to go anywhere with it.
Right.
But I think from a long term business perspective with coaches, I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing that they should be doing is getting on social and actually posting what you do. Because I feel like that's
Mm.
the biggest downfall for a lot of coaches right now in our industry is they're constantly complaining. There's especially the younger coaches. I feel like it's more the younger coaches and the
Yeah.
old heads. The old heads don't really care,
Yep.
um, just because they've been around for a long time. People already know who they are. If they're big, if not, then they've probably heard of them through an article or something like that. But
Sure.
if you're a young coach right now, the biggest thing that you could do for yourself is to hop on some type of social media and actually post content and be consistent with it. Just
Yep.
because people need to see that you're actually doing what you're saying you're doing.
Mm.
And that's probably like my biggest thing that right now, my biggest gripe with the coaching world of things is that there's so many intelligent people out there that just choose not to use these platforms.
Yeah.
And they could be trendsetters in the industry if they just literally decided to use them more often.
I agree with that. It's really interesting, especially I'm going to say kind of from the older group, and here's why: because they have the 10 year, because they have the experience and the trial and the error and all that stuff. Like, I think it's great for them to share,
Yes.
to help everybody else, right? Whether it's speaking engagements, whether it's blogs, video, social, whatever the case may be. I think it's amazing to hear from the people that have been there, done that. But I also think to a certain extent, there's a downfall with them because they are so stuck in what was and not what is current, if that makes sense. And so
Yes.
you have to kind of pick and choose a little bit. And this isn't like pointing at any individual, it's just a generality, but you have to kind of pick and choose a little bit about, okay, yes, I agree with him or her there, but at the same time, they're looking at it from this perspective because of whatever case may be, right? And so it's just kind of having that understanding, but I think it could net positive if they shared more. I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
In all honesty, now with the young bucks, I think there's some of them that can do a better job of listening to the
Yeah.
to the older coaches, um, and learning and going from that component of things, and still being humble enough to be like, I'm young, I'm ambitious, I'm etc. But I still have a lot to learn. But
Yes.
I can still get better at X, Y, Z, and because sometimes there's a focus on looking the part without actually being the part too, right? With
Yeah.
young coaches or whatever, because they understand social is a big deal, et cetera, et cetera. I can get popular rather quickly or whatever the case may be. And that doesn't mean, just like you said earlier, there's coaches with large followings that are bad coaches. There's coaches with no
Yes.
followings that are, great coaches. And so it's just kind of having that medium of, okay, cool, I'm good with this, I can get better at that, and just having a realistic thought process on where you're currently at and what you can improve on.
Yeah, I think there's validity to that. I think
Yeah.
obviously like early on for myself, like
Yep.
I'll give an example just cuz I like using my own experience through this,
Yeah.
but like so like my podcast for example,
Hmm.
it's not my first podcast. It's my
Sure.
second go around with podcasting for a lot of people
Gotcha.
that don't know that. I started a podcast when I was about a year or two into strength and conditioning. Just
Mm.
because I personally loved the idea of having a podcast, and I
Hmm.
truly wanted to create a platform where I could learn at the same time and find professionals in the industry that could help me, come on and educate not only the target audience that I wanted to go towards, but
Sure.
also just like use it for myself selfishly and just
Mm.
like to learn. But then I fell into the idea of imposter syndrome and like not
Mm.
feeling good enough and like,
Mm.
oh, like who am I? Like I don't really know much. Like why am I going to get on a podcast and try to
Sure.
give advice to young athletes when I don't even know the advice to give to them? So, to that respect, I agree in the sense that you should kind of have a piece of humble pie and
Mm.
you should understand where you're currently at in your development and just be like, hey, like have an understanding that you might be baby faced and new
Sure.
and you might not have the quote unquote, you know, in the trenches like feel yet because you haven't actually done the work, but I don't think that also means that you shouldn't push anything out. I
Correct.
think that
Correct.
I think that also means that you just have to understand that maybe your content just has to be different. It doesn't have
Mm.
to come from a place of okay, this is what I know.
Sure. Sure.
It can simply be, hey, this is what I read.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to apply it. Let's
Yep.
see if it works and let's track the journey of how I went from not knowing anything to now this is what I know.
Well,
And
I
these are
think
the results
that's, yeah, 100%. I think if a coach was to do that, right? Because, talk about Gary Vee. Let's go back to this for a real second
yes.
because I'll make a connection here. Gary Vee talks so much more about show than tell, right? Show them what you're doing. He also calls it documenting the journey, right? And that's exactly what you just said. Like if you were just to document or just share, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Here's my thought process on X. Let's see if it pans out. Then um, people will be like, yeah, that makes sense. And you would get a lot of traction rather quickly, I would assume,
Yeah.
because you're bringing them along with you rather
Yes.
than just, so I do this, right? Like, this is what I do. Okay, well, that's cool. But, like, if you were to be like, this is what I plan on doing, here's why I plan on doing it, um, let's see how it goes. And then it's, hey, week one, yeah, it was okay. It wasn't that good. Week two, yeah, it was okay. It wasn't that good. Week three was a lot better. Four, here's my adjustments. Let's go forward. People will be like, okay, cool, that makes sense because they're going through that process with you as well. Um,
Yes.
and so I think if you kind of go by that, document, show rather than tell, I think you're in a much better spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just because like people are so enamored by the destination that they forget about the journey.
Mm.
And I think the journey though, when it comes to content creation makes more sense because the journey allows us to create a story.
Yeah.
And that's what people come to actually be a part of. That's where communities are built. That's where like actually like getting your audience to want to buy in and engage with you because now you're creating a story for them and now they're enamored by the journey and the actual story of it all versus just finding out what happens at the destination or finding out what happens at the end of the story.
Yeah.
They want to know like the actual details, like the little nitty-gritty stuff that goes along with it.
Yep. 1000%. Right. And that's what great producers, directors,
Storyteller. Yeah.
storytellers, they give you a glimpse, they bring you along for it, they bring you along for it. There's some emotional stuff that comes in it, right?
Yeah.
And then boom, here's the final hero's journey, whatever the case may be, right? It's really interesting when you look at movies conceptually, they all follow a very similar pattern.
Hmm.
And it's typically what we just talked about, hook you in, show you a little bit of the end, and then there's always a decision or some sort of emotional distress, right? From the main
Yes.
character, from the antagonist, from the protagonist, whatever the case may be. There's always some sort of emotional distress, something that they have to overcome, something that they have to, whatever the case may be, to allow them to get to the other side. And I think most people don't even think about it. They just watch movies, but they don't think about movies, if that makes sense, whether that's movies, whether that's videos. Mr. Beast does this and he does it in a great job, right? Like,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying? So it's really interesting from that standpoint when you take a step back and look at them rather than just consume the movie in itself. But
Absolutely.
switching gears, man. So in the private sector, tell us about the private sector. What made you get into it? You see a lot of coaches that either come from the collegiate side and then go private, go tactical. What do you love about the private sector?
Honestly, I originally wanted to be a physical therapist. So for a
Mm,
lot of people that don't know me, my story, whatever, I actually wanted to originally become a physical therapist. This wasn't my first profession. Um, so it just so happened that life had other plans for me, and an opportunity fell in my lap where I could start my private sector career in strength and conditioning. After a year or two in the private sector, kind of an hour's worth of research in the field. I
yeah.
just knew it was a better option for me and my future in this industry.
Mm,
Seeing that I also don't have, a formal degree or, a CSCS, it makes me feel better knowing that 5 years later, I'm doing as well as I am, knowing that, many told me I'd never amount to anything in this field just
mm,
because I don't have those things. But I'd rather work 90 plus hours a week in a private sector than get into a college or pro organization where my job is insecure or promised, and I have to kind of get resistance from someone who may not have the same level of understanding of physiology and the body as I may. I can kind of go to bed at night knowing I'm building something that I'm proud of, and creating
yeah.
a brand that I'm passionate about and that no one can really take away from me or kind of censor. um,
Mm, mm,
and that's kind of where my love for the private sector is. It's just that, like, I can genuinely be me and create a brand that I'm happy and passionate about every morning.
yeah.
I ask anybody who knows me, I live and die for the brand that I represent.
Yeah.
I'm a very loyal, passionate person, and for me, it's like if I'm not happy waking up doing what I'm doing, then I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to find
Yeah.
another plan. I'm going to go about it in a different way.
Mm,
But for me, it just the idea of being able to come in every day and just know that what I'm doing is a representation of the brand that I'm putting together. That's something for me that's a little bit better than just saying, hey, I'm representing a university, an organization that
mm,
could at any point in time cut ties with me for no
yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
I have so much love and admiration for people who live in and work in the college sector, because I believe what you guys do
Sure.
is very, very important. I think especially at the higher levels.
Sure.
So I don't want this to sound like a
Yeah.
smear campaign towards the college sector at all, or
Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
organizations whatsoever.
Yeah.
What they do is what you guys do is truly amazing. Um, but for me personally, in my opinion, I've been able to do what I've been able to do for the last 5 years, and I just don't think I could replace it with anything else.
I think there's a huge part to that, right? And
Yep.
building a personal brand, representing a brand, representing the company that you work for with Jerry and
Yep.
everything. I think that's a huge part of it. I think it's I think building a personal brand, regardless of private or collegiate sector, is a must.
Yes. 100%.
Like 1,000%, because yes, a university could cut ties with you, a business can cut ties with you, unless it's your business that you own, right? Um,
Yes.
and so it's like having that personal brand of like who you are and what you stand for too. I think that's really important. And
Hmm.
consistently showing up, I think that's really important. I think we can learn a lot from the guys in the private sector. And here's what I mean by that. You guys have a different um, skill set that you may not have at the collegiate sector. And what I mean by that is you have to keep athletes coming back in order to be in business, right?
Yes.
You have to keep them paying and happy in order to be afloat. Whereas in the collegiate sector, yes, we are still salespeople. We still sell to our athletes. We still sell to admin. We still sell to other coaches as well, right?
Yeah.
But if an athlete walks away mad about a session or upset with the coach or whatever the case may be, they don't have to, the coaches don't have to worry about, are they going to drop their membership? Now the transfer portal is
Yes.
ever, you know, changing now, and it's the new hottest thing or whatever. And sure, there's the
Yep.
component of that. But for y'all, if you have a member, an athlete, a customer that walks away, not only do they walk away, but they're probably going to pull a couple people away with them or tell
Yes.
people about their experience or whatever the case may be, which hurts business. How do you guys kind of approach it from that standpoint? Or what would you share with college coaches or coaches in general that are like, what skill set, how do you guys keep your clients, customers, athletes happy while still achieving high results?
Yeah, and I think, you hit on a couple of really good things, and I think it's pretty cliche, but and I hate the word coming out of my mouth, but we just have to create an infectious culture and community of athletes that
Mm,
you just want to be around. And I
mm,
think anybody who's in the private sector or even in the college sector, just creating an infectious environment is
mm,
something you can't really take away from them.
mm.
And I know a lot of buzzwords come up when discussing this particular topic of culture in our circles.
Yeah.
But to me, true culture shows itself when you have a veteran high school or a college athlete that's working in your facility who can help guide a younger 11, 13, 12-year-old athlete through a training session.
Mm,
That's when you've kind of created a good culture. And that's something that I feel like we've been able to do. They say if you give a man a fish, it'll feed him for a day. If you
yep.
teach him how to fish, it'll feed him for life. Well, training athletes isn't much different. Creating a culture isn't much different. If you want to
Right.
amplify your gym, your culture, and overall reach to help more athletes, teach them the why, how, and when.
Yes.
You'll create Not only will you create better athletes and better students, you'll create dozens of mini assistant coaches for yourself in the private sector. And I think that's an underrated aspect of getting kids to want to be a part of your growing family and community of athletes that continues to come back because we hold our athletes to a high standard. And eventually they'll emphasize the things that you're emphasizing often in training sessions later on in life. And
Yeah.
I think that's what's superiorly underrated in what we do, no matter if it's the college or the private sector. But I think that's a big thing that college coaches can take away from private sector coaches is give them the why, how, and when, and
Mm,
just continue to hold them to your standard. Eventually, obviously, there's give and take in the private sector. Yes, you have to keep people happy as well. That's another
yeah.
thing that I think coaches in the college sector could also learn from us is you have to keep people happy a little as well.
Hmm.
And I think from your understanding from a college perspective, to a degree, you guys have to do the same thing. You
Yeah.
have coaching staffs
Hmm.
that give you objectives and
Right.
things in the beginning of your seasons or even in your off season planning. There's going to be conversations with coaching staffs that have to be met. And they're a lot of times going to have goals for their athletes as well.
Yep.
So I think there's always a give and take. Like I always have, I have a parent of little Johnny who's 12 years old that comes into me and says, hey, like, he's a basketball player and like I really just want you to work on like explosive agility, change of direction, and like I want him to have a crazy high vertical jump. But and then like you get the questions like and then you'll get like other coaches or other sports coaches that come in and like, hey, like, little Johnny, 12-year-old, like he's a baseball player. Like, I need you to work on a lot of rotational power. I saw you guys doing med ball throws with some athletes. Like,
Yeah.
or I want to make sure Johnny's doing those when he comes here. So yeah, sometimes you have to eat a little bit of humble pie, and you have to be like, hey, yeah, sure, like I'll make you happy. I'll throw in like a set or two of med ball rotational throws, even though when it comes to a 11 to 12 or 13-year-old, the pretty much the premise of your training should all be about general strength and speed qualities. Like, listen, little Johnny doesn't have to be doing anything sport specific
Yeah.
for a very long time. And that's very evident in our field. But
Yeah.
when it comes to the private sector, that's probably the one thing that differentiates from private to
Mm.
college is you have to make people happy a little bit. So sometimes in our approach, if all I have to say is, yeah, sure, we'll get Johnny doing a couple of rotational med ball throws to get him to come into the door for the first time. Once they're in your facility, though, you can do whatever you have to do.
Yep.
But if it makes people happy and you need to tell them that, that's the one thing about the private sector that you kind of have to do that differentiates from college. But these are the things that I think are truly, truly impactful from our side that we could take to the college side. And that's just, teaching them the why, how, and when of things, and just kind of creating miniature assistant coaches for yourselves, especially from your level. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes there aren't guys that are 4-year guys, transfer portal, stuff like that. People are going to leave. People are going to transfer now. But if you do have the opportunity to coach somebody for 4 years, those people could become your assistant coaches if you teach them the right way and you hold them to the standards in which you hold them to.
Yeah.
They can turn into mini coaches for you. And then when a new batch of freshmen come in, guess what? You have coaches that have been through your system now for a couple of years, and they can now become little coaches for you. And that little community that you have can then grow from there, because now you're holding these new individuals to a higher standard. And eventually that'll emphasize as the years go on and you build connections with them.
Yeah, that's 100% facts. Like, and I'll tell you, even at the collegiate level, high school level, you still get the coach wants to see X, Y, and Z because that's what they think makes the program good. They want to see hip mobility. They want to whatever, right? You name it. Coaches that are listening, if y'all listen, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, yes. They want to see whatever else. They want their athletes to look a certain way. They got to be sweating every time they're in there, otherwise they're not working hard enough. Like, you get all these, I'm going to say generalities and misconceptions that even when you're interviewing, right? Like, they could be looking for particular buzzwords that are either going to give you the job or not. Like, everybody that's listening, and you know that too, it's the same thing, right? So it's like, whether it's a parent that says, hey, I want to see rotational med ball throws, or it's someone that says, I want to see shoulder work, or I want to see ankle work, or I want to see, whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, sure, we can do that. But to your point, once they come in the facility, then you got to do what you need to do. But it's still a factor at the collegiate level of like, I want to see this in the program. Let's throw it out there. I want to see Olympic lifting in the program. Like, okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, sure. Even though you have no understanding of it at all. But yeah,
exactly.
It's crazy. Go ahead.
It's true, and it's just something that lives and breathes in our industry, and it's something that we have to do regardless of whether you're in the private or the collegiate sector. There's always somebody that we have to make happy. And that even with the athletes themselves, sometimes like you'll see it a lot when kids come in for a session, like for the first time, and they, a lot of times, like the beginning assessment process, especially when you're feeling them out and you're trying to get like an idea of what their goals are, because obviously that plays a part in everything as well. Like, athletes have goals. You're going to get athletes that are like, hey, like, when am I going to start doing this? And when am I going to start doing that? And like, sometimes that's where the education and the teaching them the why, how, and when comes in place. But also understanding that, like, if you have to do some things to make them happy and make them coming back, that's something that you might have to deal with. But other times, like I said, once you get them in your facility, you could generally do whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
But that's where education comes in as well, because, athletes are going to have a preconceived idea about what strength and conditioning is, especially if they've never been in that environment before and they don't
Yep.
have the knowledge base that we do. So it's up to us as coaches to be educators. Coaches are
Yes.
educators. So we need to be instilling them with the proper knowledge and the ideas of what actually makes a good session, and just be real with them and honest. I feel like sometimes coaches are afraid in the private sector to be honest with their athletes, but
Mm.
sometimes their athletes will benefit more from hearing honesty rather than just being filled with lies. And I
Yeah.
think that's also a big component of it as well.
Yeah, I think people, particularly in the private sector, are afraid to be honest to a certain extent because they feel like if they tell them something that they don't want to hear, they'll lose them as a customer or as a client.
Yes.
And they're afraid of the X amount of dollars they pay per month being no longer going towards the business. But
Absolutely.
but the best way to ensure you're continuing to retain your clients or customers is to tell them the truth
Yes.
because they will love you for it. Even if it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to recommend this person over here for you. That
Yep.
goes so much further than trying to maneuver your way through something and you don't feel good about it. They don't feel good about it. And then in a month or 2 or 3, they cancel it. It's the best thing for you
Yeah.
to do is just say, maybe I'm not the best person for you, and that's okay. I'm okay losing your business, but I gain your respect and your trust, and that's far more important than what money can provide.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we hear it in our profession all the time. Like, kids aren't really going to buy into what you're saying unless they know you care, right? So it's like one of those things where sometimes just being brutally honest, again, you don't have to go about it in an ignorant and like
Right,
malicious way,
right,
but just being real with them and meeting them where they're at and actually being like genuine enough to care and tell them like, hey, listen, you're not there yet. Like,
yeah,
don't worry about this. Like, let's focus on this. This is where you're currently at. Let's try to just get to from point A to point B, and then we'll
yeah,
worry about point C.
right,
But just worry about, taking it one step at a time, but just being honest. I even just experienced this recently with a college basketball player that I'm working with right now. Like, he told me the other day, he's like, listen, I'm going to be really honest with you. Like, the reason I like coming here and the reason I like being around you guys is because, I can see how genuine you are in your pursuit to help me get to where I want to be. He's like, listen, like I've seen it, like, the attention to detail you put into my programming, like the
yeah.
hours and hours of conversations that we've had that aren't related to, you know, training.
Training.
Because I think that's another thing. It's like
Yeah.
you don't just have to talk about training, like actually just building relationships and getting to know these people,
Yeah.
like just like and just understanding where their heart is and like who they are as people. Like that's like another big thing, like just getting to know these people. Like they're human beings, they're not like robots, they're not just athletes, they're human beings. Meet them where they're at, and then just like he told me, he's like, just I could tell that like everything you're doing is because you really care and you want to see me do well. Like, and I think that's like a massive component to this, is like just showing the athletes you care, and then like just showing it through your actions. And
Yeah.
sometimes that is just like being real with them and just sitting down and being like, hey dude, like I know this is what you want to do, but like I don't think you're there yet.
Yeah.
Just being honest. Like,
There is such a massive um if you were trying to get people to like buy into you, buy into your program, the best thing for you to do is not talk about your program and is to not talk about it. It is to get to know them. It is to ask questions about them, where they're from, their family, their siblings, their significant others, what they like to do on the weekends, what did they do this past weekend. Like all of that stuff will get them to do so much more for you and your program than you telling them how intelligent you are or showing them or whatever. Like just get to know them, you know?
yes.
And the hours of BSing and the hours of just talking, not even about training, maybe some training here and there, whatever the case may be, but you got to be able to talk with them first rather than here's my program, this is what we're doing. This is the best thing, because like they don't know you yet, and you don't know them. Like, why would they want to trust you? Like, why would they?
Absolutely.
It's so interesting from that standpoint. But okay, how do y'all at the private sector balance programming from a standpoint of the sheer differences in athletes that y'all have, whether it's from an age standpoint, whether it is from a physical standpoint, technical standpoint, training age? How do you guys kind of balance the differences of the groups that you have and how your programming reflects that?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question just because the number one thing that just pops right into my head when you say that is you have to have a proven system in place at all
Mm,
times.
mm,
Whether you're in the college, private sector, you're going to be working with athletes of different training age, training experience.
yeah.
You're going to be working with athletes of all types. You're going to be working with people that have never been in the weight room before in their entire life. It's
Mm,
different at your level just because like you're dealing with fully grown men, and it's like, well, it's like
yeah.
to an extent,
To an
but
extent, you'd be surprised how many of these guys, like,
yeah,
bro, you'd be surprised how many of them it's like, hey, do a front squat. And it's like, okay, that was absolutely atrocious. I can tell you've
yeah.
never done that before in your life. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, but it's just crazy. I more
Yeah,
so say that in the sense where it's like you're seeing athletes that are on the older side
sure. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
more experienced in life, but
sure.
yet have never experienced the weight room once.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the problem with most young coaches and unfortunately some private sector businesses is they don't have a system in place. And I think if
Mm,
you're a prospective parent, athlete, you should be asking five main questions when you're looking for a good strength coach. One, what is their plan, approach, and structure? Two, what are they measuring and assessing? Three, how often is progress being measured? Four, are weights being tracked? And five, do you actually have proof of real previous results and successes in the past with any other athletes that are familiar with or similar to my situation?
mm,
From there, what's your assessment process and what performance indicators are you measuring, and how are these indicators going to benefit me from a long-term development standpoint? First, I think you need to be identifying your goals or needs in the sport. Maybe that's top speed, maybe it's acceleration, maybe it's strength, or it's agility, lateral change of direction. If you're a younger athlete, this is probably not as important, seeing as you may just want to work on more general qualities and not get too specific.
mm.
Treat the entire calendar year as a means of improving general strength, speed, and power qualities. Once you've identified, though, for more advanced athlete, once you've identified your athlete's needs, pick tests or key performance indicators that you can use that are reliable and repeatable. That's probably the two main words that I'm going to use in that. Reliable and repeatable, something that you could do often that is going to be standardized, and that's something that you can do that's going to be reliable over time to determine if you're improving those needs and to kind of steer your programming decisions.
Mm,
Could it be a 10-yard sprint time? If you have the tech, you have the availability. We have the Brower time systems. They've
sure.
been amazing. If you have tech at your disposal, could it be a 10-yard sprint to test lower half power and speed? Vertical jump. If you have, some type of a way to test that, that could be something there. If it's a 1 to 3 rep max for strength, a chin up isometric hold, or a body weight max rep test to evaluate upper body relative strength. Maybe it's a 5-10-5 or something as simple as a lateral jump test to gauge lateral change of direction.
Mm-hmm.
This is all important and essentially our compass to take our athletes from where they are right now to where they want to be. From there, I think next, picking your desired adaptations based on the needs and testing feedback. So basically, what needs to get better. So this can be strength, hypertrophy, explosive power.
Yeah.
This will then help us pick rep ranges we need, loads that we can use, and speeds that we can move at. We can essentially assign those things to sprints, jumps, and lifts.
Yep.
Once we do that, we can obviously pick our variations of whatever we're doing. When it comes to speed, that could be a heavier loaded sprint, reactive based sprint, lateral sprints, or you know, basically we're just picking things based on the needs analysis and the assessments so that it can help pick us what we're based on and what we need to improve on.
Mm.
You know, we're not essentially letting the tail wag the dog. You
Yeah.
know, we're picking
Yeah.
stuff that looks, we're not picking stuff that looks cute or fun based on the stuff that we're seeing on the internet. It's all being done for a reason.
Yes.
You know, we can also pick our jumps that best achieves our needs. You know, maybe it's an extensive base jump for improving rhythm, timing, and lower impacts. You know, maybe it's a
Right.
loaded jump to build more force output. Maybe it's a band accelerated jump to help us with our our velocity and speed within our power work. It all depends on what we need based on our testing feedback.
Mm.
You know, we can then choose lifts and apply the rep ranges and loads based on what the athlete needs. You know, I could be, whether that could be a power based or strength or maybe even both.
Right.
Now you aren't just like picking them just to pick them. It's all being done for a reason. So
Yep.
when it comes to athletes with a lower training age, though, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the sport an athlete plays should not even be a thought when it comes to their strength training. If you're under the age of 16 and or haven't trained for 3+ years under a consistent training regimen, they just simply need to get stronger and become more athletic. So
Yeah.
frankly, worrying about sport specificity, transfer, and strength training within an athlete less than 2 years of training age is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like putting TVs in your new house while it's still being framed and has no roof.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
just, think simple, build general qualities, push, pull, squat, hinge, split stance, a jump, a sprint, and a carry.
Yep.
Simple and easy. And
Honestly,
lastly,
and like
yeah,
if
go
you
ahead.
just do that for the majority of your programming, like
You're set.
even your quote unquote advanced athletes, right? Like
You're on a good path.
you know how you
Yeah,
get advanced? You do the basics exceptionally well. That's how you get
exactly.
advanced. You don't just get to
Exactly.
jump to these super crazy methods and super maximal, split squat, ISO. Like, no, 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 no. You have to do the basics extremely well before you even get to that. And still, that's a basic movement. The only thing that's quote unquote advanced is that it's higher than year 1 MR if we're using that super maximal as an example.
Yes.
Like, it's still
Yes.
a very basic movement. The movement is basic still. The method is advanced because of that, but you have to still do the basics. Like that's the one thing. If you don't do the basics, you can't get advanced. The advanced people do the basics exceptionally well. That's it.
Absolutely. And I think honestly, the only thing that makes an exercise advanced is just tailoring it to the needs of the athlete. And that athlete might differ from the guy standing next to you. You could be doing, and that's
Right.
the thing that I try to hit on with a lot of our athletes in our facility is like, you might be doing the same exercise as the guy next to you, but the difference is that he's been doing it longer than you have. And he's just, maybe his load is different. Maybe the
Or
speed in which he's doing it is different.
yeah,
Like,
and the intent behind it might be different.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing, and I think too many athletes get bottled up with, the social media aspect of things, and they try to just kind of chase the shiny toy rather
Yep.
than just doing the basics very well, like you just said.
Yeah.
But going back to everything, it's just like,
Yeah.
lastly, the last thing that you really need is just make sure you're organized and have a means of tracking every individual's metrics,
Yeah.
having an idea of tracking your schedule with that individual, whether it's their program, what cycle they're on, yada yada, weight tracking, and they're kind of just their individualized program. I know so many organizations, clubs, collegiate programs, they use stuff like Team Builder or some
Yep.
variation of those apps to kind of track and measure progress in the program itself.
Mhm.
But for us simple people on the private side, we've been using Google Sheets. We've done so for years, and it's simple, cheap, and it's a great way to stay organized. Just having a way to kind of individualize it in a way where everybody has their own sheet, keep it organized under one thing, and just kind of having a way to systematically improve and just show results and track everything. I think that's the number one thing about us in the private sector is just like we're tracking every single thing. And I think most people in the private sector need to be doing that in order to stand out and just show that in their area that they're actually doing what they're saying they're doing and proving it
Yeah.
at a high level.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say that for coaches in general, right? Like
Yeah.
for coaches in general, you should be tracking, I'm going to say, a large majority of the stuff that you do, whether that is, you know, uh, jump performance, sprint performance, weightlifting performance, change of direction, energy system development, photos, right? Does your body
Yes.
change? All of that stuff, attendance,
Yes.
everything from that standpoint, right? And so there's a lot of information that could be and should be tracked, in order to show
Yes.
improvement, to prove what you're doing is beneficial. Um, I think a lot of coaches can need to and should do that. And there's a lot of things out there to help you. You can never go wrong with the classic pen and paper either. But
Absolutely.
having your athletes write it down on their sheets, that's important as well. And then you having a system to show that. But there's a lot, when we look at it, it can become overwhelming very quickly on how often you're tracking, what are you tracking, when are you tracking it, is it a 3 rep, is it a 1 rep, is it a timing thing, is it an energy system development thing, is it whatever the case may be. There's so much information to be tracked continuously for one team,
Mhm.
for one team,
Yes,
let alone if you,
absolutely.
yeah, if you have 5 teams, 6 teams, if you have three, if you have large teams, small teams, if you're in the private sector. I mean, there's so much that can occur in having the organization and having a system. That's the biggest thing. If you have a system and if you're organized, the system will work for you. But
Yes.
if you don't have a system and you're disorganized, everything will be chaotic. And so building a systemized process and creating an environment where people are aligned within that system is extremely important. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, whether it's a lack of resources, people, time, where they're always working in the system, but never really on the system. And that's always a huge, huge, huge struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think, like I said, if you are somebody that's fresh in this industry, that's probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is just track every single thing and
Yeah.
document every single thing you're doing, just
Yeah.
because it also just not only just justifies what you're doing, but it also like creates a level of insurance where like now you can be like, you can never have a parent come to you and be like, hey, like my kid like how do I know that my kid is actually making progress, or how do I know that he's actually doing what you're saying he's doing? It's written all right here. I got it right
Right.
here for you. It's just written
Yep.
down. It's like it's on a document. We're tracking every 4 to 6 weeks. We're making sure that progress is being made, and it's allowing us to also steer our programming decisions. So like if we did something for 4 to 6 weeks and it didn't yield much progress, guess what? It allows us to go to the drawing board, and it now allows us to create a different plan to get us to
Mm-hmm.
where we have to be, versus
Mm-hmm.
the people that kind of just use the dartboard effect and just try to throw stuff at the board and see what sticks. A lot of those people don't end up being successful in the private sector just because of the fact that they don't necessarily know what they're doing or how they're doing it. So
Yeah.
the number one approach that I
Yeah.
can say is always create a system and just always stay on top of it, be organized, and document everything.
1000%. I couldn't agree more. I think that's the way it needs to be, especially if you're trying to be legitimate and, not as if nobody can question you, but if they do have
Yes.
questions, you have the ability to back it up and show it. I think that's
Yes.
really important. So, Julian, where can people find you online, man?
Right now, man, I'm pretty much on every platform right now. You can find me on Instagram. I'm probably the most active on there and TikTok. So at Julian Locasto, all lowercase. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and now Threads. I will be
Yeah.
I'm trying to be on. I'm gonna be really honest with you. I think I do like the direction in which that app is going so far. I like the positive energy it's bringing.
Sure.
I am active on Twitter, but I was never as active as I am on Threads now. So
Sure.
like I'm active on all of them, but like pretty much main ones that I'm on right now is probably Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Twitter.
Okay.
So you can find me at Julian Locasto on all of those platforms.
For sure.
So yeah,
That's awesome, man. If you guys are listening, go give him a follow. Okay, his Instagram, his TikTok, are extremely outstanding. He puts out fantastic content continuously, and so go give him a follow. I just want to take a second and say, man, I appreciate you, what you're doing, what you're continuously putting out with your podcast, with training, with your social media presence and everything as well. Just to let you know, keep going with it, man. Keep doing what you're doing because obviously you're doing really good things. I just wanted you to know that and to hear that, and I appreciate what you're doing, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I appreciate the time, and thank you for having me on. And I will plug the podcast. I didn't get
Yeah,
to
please
plug it in,
do.
but
Yeah,
definitely go and listen to the High Performance Hoops podcast. I try to put my stuff out there consistently as well. And your boy Kendrick was on there, so if you haven't listened
yeah.
to that as well, go do that. I highly recommend it. It was a phenomenal episode, so please do that. But again, man, thank you again for having me on. It's been a really good pleasure.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Appreciate you and your time, man. Yeah, everybody go check out his podcast as well. It was a pleasure for me to be on. And it's great to see other people doing that. And providing so many free resources for people. I think that's extremely important. So, brother, thank
Absolutely.
you. Guys, if you're listening, do a huge favor, share the show. Okay. That's the only way the show grows. I'm 1000% positive you got something from the show. So do us a huge favor, share the show. We're on YouTube, subscribe to YouTube. But more importantly, reach out to Julian and let him know what a great job he did and follow him, reach out to him and listen to his podcast. So we'll catch y'all on the next one. Julian, thank you, my man.
Thank you.
All right, guys.